Federal jobs, Title IX, affordable housing, and immigration. These are just some of the issues on voters' minds as they head to the polls. We are 18 days away from Virginia's 11th Congressional District special election, and early voting is already underway. Voters are choosing a successor to the late Jerry Connolly, who died from cancer back in May. And in order to help you make a more informed decision over the coming days, we have invited the candidates, Republican Stewart Whitson and Democrat James Walkinshaw, into our studio to talk about the issues impacting your lives. Today, we are joined by Stewart Whitson. He is a U.S. Army veteran, a former FBI special agent, a lawyer, and he is currently a senior director for the Foundation for Government Accountability, which is a conservative think tank. And Mr. Whitson, thank you so much for joining me today. Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Okay, I wanted just to dump, we got 15 minutes to go, but let's go ahead and dive right in. The last Republican to hold this office was Tom Davis. That was 1994, and he served for 7 terms before he retired from office. Why do you think voters in the 11th Congressional District, which tends to lean blue, would like to put you into office?
Well, I think because of the dynamics of a special election, this race, which normally would be hard for a Republican to win, is winnable. And that's because voters finally have a choice. And so for 16 years, because of the power of the incumbency, even Democrats didn't really have a choice. I mean, it was Conley or nothing. And so with the dynamics of a special election, they do. And the choices couldn't be more different. Not just who the candidates are, but the experience each of us brings to the table. So it's an exciting time, again, for everyone. And there's a lot of independents who have voted Democrat in the past who won't this time.
I saw a headline that said, you two could not be more different on absolutely every topic. Safe to say?
I think that's fair.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk about your top priority if you're elected.
So first and foremost, everything starts with public safety. Because if we don't feel safe in our communities, in our schools, in our neighborhoods, then nothing else matters. And so, as you mentioned, I'm a former federal law enforcement officer. I spent a decade in the FBI working counterterrorism matters, but also working on the SWAT team and doing high-risk arrests. So I've seen the danger that comes from folks along the border, MS-13, those kind of characters. And so what we've had for 4 years with the opponent is a sanctuary policy and a wide-open border with the previous administration. And so that has invited into our neighborhood a flood of violent crime and drugs, predators. And so we need to deal with that issue.
I wanted to ask you, so our own reporting, has said Fairfax County has seen a drop in homicide, assault, vehicle theft cases, but shoplifting tends to be something that persists. FCPD Chief Kevin Davis has said the number of violent crimes has decreased. So I'm just curious, by a lot of metrics, we are seeing crime go down. I'm talking specific to Fairfax County, and you're saying this is a major cornerstone of your campaign.
Yes, so it's a big problem. So we have a couple problems. One, there's an underreporting of crime in a lot of cases. But the other thing is really, and this is kind of a point that my opponent is trying to make, is we're the least bad option of areas. And so just because crime is down from really high historic numbers doesn't mean it's at a good spot.
What do you mean underreporting? Where are you getting that information?
So there's a lot of the crime statistics that come out. People don't feel as if they report a crime to the police that anything's going to happen, and so they don't bother to. And so I think there's a lot of crime that goes unreported. So the numbers are much higher. In D.C., we have the example of the supervisor for the D.C. police is under investigation for modifying the numbers. So all that to say crime is a real problem, and all you have to do is look at the Fair Oaks Mall. And so earlier this summer, a young child was grabbed in broad daylight and kidnapped. And so fortunately, as he was coming out of the mall, his mother saw him and stopped it. But
Fair Oaks Mall, it was an attempted abduction, and it was something that really resonated with our viewers. It's something we've reported on extensively.
So that was soft. So my opponent's soft on crime policy, which is supported by all the Democrats, is part of the problem. So that person that committed that had 30 priors, was released without bail, stole a car the next day and committed that crime. And so that is just an example of the kind of stuff that's going on.
Let's talk about, you've said you support what's happening in D.C. right now with the federalization of the police. Under what circumstances would you not support similar actions, especially when it comes to the state of Virginia?
Well, push back a little bit. No one's federalizing the police. But
they absolutely are federal. Tell me what you mean by that.
So that's not happening. So basically what's happening right now is in the Federal District of Columbia, which is already a federal district, they're bringing in National Guard forces and having a more active role from the federal authorities to help.
The president has federalized the Metropolitan Police Department. He used the Home Rule Act, which he repealed a portion of. And so are we talking about two separate things
here? So
here?
maybe we have to, maybe it's semantics, but so there definitely federal resources are coming in to help stop a serious problem in DC, which is crime. And that's the thing. Anyone who works in D.C., lives in D.C., either has faced crime themselves or they know close friends who have. And so everyone here recognizes the problem. This should be nonpartisan, stopping crime in D.C. And guess what? The statistics that are coming out shows it's working. So carjackings are down by huge numbers. And so this is a big deal. And the people are happy about it.
I wanted to go back to my question, under which circumstances would you not support similar actions when it comes to the state of Virginia? Yeah,
so that's so that you're spot on. So Virginia is a commonwealth. It's not the federal district of Columbia. So
Correct.
That's a very different scenario. And so for the National Guard to come in, something like that, that would be Governor Youngkin would be someone who'd make a call on that. So
still though, I mean, just if we're talking, just like having a conversation, I think people are worried, right? So they're worried. We're listening to viewers say, hey, we're seeing what's happening in D.C. We're seeing this federal surge take place within Washington, D.C. And of course, we're worried that that could extrapolate to other cities, especially in places like, let's say, Northern Virginia. And so would you push back against seeing something like that?
Yeah,
within your own
so I'm
communities?
talking to thousands of voters across the district. No one has said they're worried about that. I haven't heard that once. And Democrats, Independents, Republicans.
You're talking to people.
Yes, so to real people. What I hear worry about is the crime.
Okay.
And so I do think there's a good role, so federal authorities can work in partnership with states. And so, form joint task forces focused on violent crime, things like that. So I think that is something I would gladly welcome into our district, and I think most of the voters would as well.
And is that something that you would partner with Fairfax County Police Department on? And how would you execute that?
Yeah, so I'll give a model. So again, spent a decade in the FBI. This is a model we do all the time where state entities will reach out to the federal folks and work in partnership on common threats. So you have the joint terrorism task forces that do this. There's violent crime task forces. And so what I'm saying is we should do that right now. This is the perfect time to have agencies form these joint groups together, task forces, and then work together to stop crime.
Let's talk about DOJ. Do you feel the Department of Government Efficiency should continue? And if so, why?
Yeah, so I think it's become a loaded term. So I think when you say DOJ, it means something different to everyone else. And so what I like about that effort was all the wasteful spending it was able to stop. And so $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru, that is not effective use of money. And so what's great about
I've got to push you on that because that was debunked. The White House, said USAID provided a $32,000 grant to fund transgender comic books in Peru. That's not correct. It's been debunked.
No, you're wrong. It hasn't been debunked. It just wasn't USAID funding.
The
it was another
author came out, David Lawrence, said there were no transgender characters. It's debunked, is my point. But to your greater point here, I'm hearing you say that DOJ eliminated some spending. Is that where you were going with what you were saying?
Yeah, so what I'm saying is the government coming in and doing an audit to stop wasteful spending is common sense. It's something that most Americans support very strongly. What about layoffs? When the layoffs were announced with DOJ, you've been talking with real people one-on-one, and how have those conversations been going? Yeah, so I think anytime anyone gets laid off from a job, whether it's the federal government or private sector, it's heartbreaking. Sure. And so, but my big focus is, well, how do we move forward? How do we get if people have lost a job, how do we help them find a new one and move forward? And so here's the problem with my opponent. My opponent's plan is he's going to fight President Trump. That's his plan. And so my question to voters would be, how is that going to help solve the problem? How is that going to help us move forward? Sure. And so what we need is to put someone in there who will serve the community, who will work with both administrations. Someone who will come in and work with the Republican administration, and someone who will work with the Democrat administration. I am that candidate who will do that. That is the way to move forward. If we have someone come into office who's going to fight President Trump, that's not going to help the problems we're facing. That's going to make them worse. Real quick, before we move on, do you want DOJ to be permanent? I meant to ask you that. So do I want the idea of an audit? Do you want it to be more of a permanent, I would love to have every single administration, whether Republican or Democrat, when they come into office, if they want to look for wasteful spending and eliminate wasteful spending, then I'm all for that. Are you at all worried? So the DOJ website has receipts. They've posted, they say $205 billion in estimated savings. There's some critique. Politico is saying those numbers are exaggerated. DOJ has saved less than 5% of its claimed savings. And to that you would say? I'd say over $1 billion in savings. If we all agree that only $1 billion has been saved, that's still a good thing. I'll take $1 billion over zero. And so this is the kind of thing that so that's the argument. People are seeing a lot of savings and they're trying to say, oh, it's not as much as you're claiming, but we're all agreeing that it is creating savings, and that's a good thing. Let's go back to Virginians, especially ones who work for the federal government. I know you said you've worked for the federal government for quite some time, so this is it's personal to you in a big way.
Many of them have lost their jobs. We've been watching our neighbors and our community talk about how distressing that has been. How do you plan on attracting more jobs for those who are still looking for work?
So I think first and foremost, we have to stimulate the economy by lowering taxes. We need to put more money in the pockets of not just taxpayers, but small businesses so they can create jobs. We need to put a candidate into this position who can work with the current administration to open up opportunities and to create an environment. Because here's the other thing I'm worried about. It's not just people who've lost jobs. There's people that are still in the agencies that may be feeling not secure in their position. And so I want to help with that. That is an immediate concern as well. And some of that is founded and some of it's unfounded. Some of it's just, the left media pushing this narrative that their jobs are in jeopardy, to try to score political points.
Are their jobs not in jeopardy?
No, so I don't think not to the level that some in the media are trying to portray it. But I want to come in and help.
Does that sound like cold comfort to people in Northern Virginia, people around the DMV who have been laid off en masse due to DOJ cuts, due to federal cuts? I mean, I was listening to one of your interviews and you were saying, hey, they need to start looking for a second career path. What would that tangibly look like for someone?
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying, I'd have to see that.
Okay.
But because what my comment has always been is if there's good federal employees that got pushed out of the federal government and they want to come back in, I want to find a way to get them back in.
Back into the federal
government because there's opportunities. These are great people who have years of experience, cannot be replicated in a classroom. If they want to come back in the federal government, there are opportunities for that to happen.
Definitely.
But more importantly is if they want to find those second positions, we need to free up businesses. And so what do we have? We have a huge technology sector. We have federal contracting companies. And so being in the FBI for a decade, I worked with a lot of those companies. So I know that the value they bring, not just to the FBI, but to the country to help keep us safe. And so we can find opportunities for these folks to move into those kind of positions if that's what they want. But again, we need to have someone who can go in, who can work with the current administration and move forward. And my opponent's not. His plan is to fight against Trump, and that's just going to make the problem worse.
I wanted to talk about, do you support ICE actions in removing people here illegally, especially those with a criminal record?
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Yes. So it's pretty simple. So for 4 years, the Biden administration had a wide open border, 1.7 million known gotaways. And so what's a gotaway? That means that federal authorities had stopped people that were illegally crossing the border. They looked over and saw others crossing, and they couldn't leave this group. And so that's the Biden administration's numbers, 1.7 million. And so yes, there are some good people that came across, but there's a lot of really bad people that came across. And so at the same time that was happening, my opponent was promoting a sanctuary policy in Fairfax County that attracted those folks to come into our area.
Let's talk
about.
So
we want ICE to get those dangerous people off the criminal.
I don't think anyone here would argue with you about getting the dangerous criminals, the violent criminals. I feel like that everyone can agree that's a good thing. What we're seeing in some of our reporting is that, does arresting people off the street, let's say, our Matthew Torres was doing some reporting the other day, there were construction workers that were roofing a house and they were picked up, mid-job. And so does arresting people off the streets, potentially with no violent criminal record, does that make our communities safer?
Yeah, sometimes this coming from a law enforcement background, sometimes the safest way to arrest someone, especially when you have a warrant and you're going after a specific person, is in an environment like that, as opposed to coming to their home in the morning. It's actually a lot safer to do it in that environment, so that could be part of the reason.
Let's talk about critics say the recent restrictions in the big beautiful bill will impact healthcare costs tremendously, especially in the area of Medicaid. Are you in support, and why?
Of the one big beautiful bill?
So in regard to cutting Medicaid.
Well, so the one big beautiful bill, it's all together, so it's all or nothing. And so my opponent would have voted against that, which would have been the largest tax increase in American history. And so the one big beautiful bill has a lot of things other than just Medicaid. That's one component, which I'll answer your question in a second.
It's a huge component.
But here's the deal. The one big beautiful bill is going to put, to the average Virginia family with 2 kids, up to $14,800 in their pocket. Yes, I strongly support that.
Let's talk about the $1.1 trillion cut to healthcare, to Medicaid. It's largely going to catch the brunt of that. And so, the bill cut $1.1 trillion in healthcare, largely due to modifications in Medicaid. And so, do you support cuts to Medicaid?
Well, and so just to clear the record, so Medicaid funding is going to go up every single year. After passage of the one big beautiful bill, it will go up every single year for the next 10 years. At an average rate of 25%.
So we've seen Representative Andy Harris say that, right?
Yeah, so no, money's not getting cut.
But how does that work? How do you go from, cutting $1.1 trillion in healthcare and then to somehow gaining 25%.
But you're not cutting. So what they're
How
saying,
does that work?
So what they're saying is it's just not going up as much. And so the left is calling that a cut, even though it's an increase. And everyone in the media just parrots those words.
So there will
it
be no cuts to Medicaid, is
no,
what you're saying.
So I'll give you an
That's
example. They
false.
No,
That's unequivocally false. How can you say that?
So I'll give you an example. So one of the things they like to say is that reforming Medicaid, that people are going to get cut from Medicaid. And so when you look at the numbers, that comes from a report from the Congressional Budget Office, CBO. And so when you look at, okay, well, who are the people getting cut?
Yeah.
Let me tell you who those are. 1.4 million illegal aliens. They're not legally allowed to be on the program, but CBO is projecting 1.4 million illegal aliens will lose coverage. They're calling that a cut.
That did not pass into the final bill. The 1.4 million was a provision.
It's
it
not a
was
provision.
it was related to states. That it didn't pass into the final bill, though.
No, you're wrong. So yeah, you're wrong.
No,
so yeah, I'm
no,
sorry.
no.
Sorry, I got to push back. So
I-
yeah, and so then the other one is dual enrollment. So 5.8 million people on Medicaid were dual enrolled in 2 states, which is illegal, and it costs around $12 billion a year.
Let me back you all the way back up, though,
Okay.
because we'll leave the 1.4 million undocumented immigrants on the table here.
Okay.
We're also going to say, you have said no one will lose Medicaid coverage. The CBO is
I'm
estimating
saying no one who's
is cut, right? No one who is legally entitled to it. I feel like you're playing semantics, though, because listen, 90% of the people who would lose Medicaid coverage are Americans. 0 of them are undocumented immigrants are not generally eligible for full Medicaid benefits.
And that's the whole scheme, is states were having them get it anyways. Okay. And so they're going to stop that. But the 5.8 million is people dual enrolled in states. And so what the One Big Beautiful Bill says is, no, you can keep your coverage if you're in Virginia, but if you're still enrolled in another state, we're going to stop that. CBO counted that as a cut. But 5.8 million of those people being cut are still having coverage. And so why do they do that? It's just a game where they use it, and then the media repeats that term over and over, and then people just think it's reality, and it's not.
I did want to ask, as we're wrapping up our interview here, as people are getting to know you, anything else that you would say to them as they are heading to cast their vote?
Yeah, so I would say this. Look, I'm a proud husband of 20 years. I have 5 school-age children. I'm a U.S. Army combat veteran that personally led over 300 combat missions in Iraq, including a mission that led to the successful rescue of a hostage, and I'm a federal law enforcement officer. And so it's time to restore common sense in our district, and I'm someone that can do that.
15 minutes is a marathon to have an interview, and I certainly appreciate your time, Mr. Whitson. Thank you so much for joining us here in studio today.
Thank you, Simone.
Thank you so much. And just a reminder, Election Day is September 9th. Early voting goes until September 6th, and the Democratic candidate in this race, James Walkinshaw, will be joining us in studio on September 3rd. We'll be right back.